Oh, you do? Okay, I was going to say I didn't bring mine.
I never
I didn't
have.
stop
Mine's
at
all
home.
ebooks. Just assume it's on my phone. Every single time I'll be like, it's this.
Josh wants to.
It's recording.
Oh,
Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Kaila.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. And today we are going to be going over a Stephen King novel. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I will say it is the book that got me into consistently reading chapter books, and in particular fiction, much more. I read it 12 years ago, and the book that I'm talking about is The Green Mile. And The Green Mile, there are plenty of people that are aware of the film edition with Michael Clarke Duncan, Tom Hanks, Michael Jeter, and
It's a great movie.
Never seen it.
You should.
Up until the moment you mentioned it, forgot that it was in the...
Yeah, no,
I would
it's
say
pretty
it's
accurate.
It's one. I would say my second or third favorite Stephen King
Okay.
film adaptation.
Very
I
good.
would say The Shawshank Redemption is my favorite
For sure.
Stephen King film adaptation. To the point that I would even say it was a bit better than the novella.
You know,
is tough.
I think I
Wow,
first
those are some strong
saw
words.
The Green Mile. My dad had my brother and I like. You need to watch this movie. This is one of the best movies they have out there. And I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Oh my god!
I was young, but it was like I understood what was happening, and I felt like it just like it's one of those movies and one of those stories that really kind of it almost kind of reminds me of a way sort of that Remember the Titans, where you see like the whole race kind of thing.
Okay,
and it kind of
little bit.
introduces you to like the prejudices against people based on the color of their skin. So
Yeah, it
and
does
it's-
a very good job with,
Mhm.
dealing with the discrimination and race issues. And it kind of very cleverly disguises it in this kind of fictional horror story. But it's not really a horror story.
It's not horror. I
It's
think
a story
it's so-
with horror in
It was described as more of an
Yes.
adventure,
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
a
say
good
I
one.
think it's more fantastic.
but I would say
Super, like,
Supernatural.
I would say
Yeah.
it's not the most horror of Stephen King's horror,
Uh-huh.
but
I
it's
would
not.
classify it
I
as
wouldn't
horror.
say it's the least horror of his horror either.
Yeah, it's got its moments.
Because he's written The Dark Tower or Eyes of the Dragon, I would say, is the least horror of his or anything that he's writing now, like the Hodges trilogy. But you have a discussion starter for this?
Well, I
Jesse?
kind of already went into it a little bit where we talked about. I found this book. There's a lot to cover in this book, and there's a lot of different topics and a lot of angles and different timelines, and there's so much. So it's hard for me, I feel like, to pick a single discussion question. So I'm just gonna kind of maybe like gear some of the things I thought about. But I guess while we're on the subject, we'll start with how people were completely blinded by the fact that Coffee, was trying to help these girls based off, frankly, on how he looked. He was big. He was African American.
Yeah.
And
Big, black, and
scary.
and
not
Like,
exactly...
not intelligent.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like a nice way of saying it, because he's such a
So-
wonderful character. You don't want to talk ill of him at all. But like it's that
It says on the back of the book he's got the mind of a child.
yes,
Yeah.
And I feel like, and they cover how, they don't really cover like, the whole court case and everything. They touch upon it, but nobody bothered to ask him.
Yeah, and there almost was, like,
There was
there
no
was
trial.
almost no trial.
That's
Yeah,
very,
because he didn't
it's
put
very
up a-
reflective of the trial
the
of
time
To Kill a
period.
the time.
Mockingbird.
Yeah.
Which, where it was 1932, maybe a little bit earlier, where Stephen King's good with the years, so I should know exactly.
32.
I think it was
32
like
was
Yeah.
when he was when the whole all of the events took place.
Yeah.
But during that time, it was separate but equal for black people.
Well,
And
equal.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, yeah, that
it
wasn't
not-
equal.
no, in that case, it wasn't
not
equal.
equal.
It
No.
was very separate in the way that he had his. It wasn't like
he had the trial, but it wasn't really a
Yeah.
trial.
And-
Right.
especially
Right.
down in this was in Maine.
Yeah,
No,
No,
this
this
one
one
is
is
Louisiana.
Georgia.
Yeah.
It was down south.
Yeah.
He was
I
not
can't
somebody who
tell
could
you.
defend himself. He was black.
Mhm.
He was, literally caught red-handed.
In the South. you can
So
forget
nobody
about that.
even kind of asked any
Mhm.
questions, and because it was two little white girls,
Mhm.
and they say it right in the story, like
Mhm.
they needed a
They-
target, and he was the target. And he
and
literally
I feel
was
like
caught with a
they
missile.
do. They say it a lot where, it's just like, well, somebody's got to go down for this, and here's a
Mm.
N-word that they
Yeah,
use
and it's
Mm.
ugly,
a lot,
but, yeah.
but it's like, well, we didn't find the actual bad guy, so here we go. Like,
Right.
that's it. Who cares? It's
And I
Like
will
just...
have
something
to
when they
say,
actually
that
did.
plot twist of
Oh
swinging
my
it
God.
around at the
Mhm.
end of who
Mhm.
actually may have
So
been
when
the,
I was like going through it, I was like,
didn't
what
even see
if?
it coming.
I just like idly was like,
Didn't
what if
even.
it was him? And then
Mm.
they were like, boom, it was him, and I was like, what?
And
What?
the big question at hand is whether or not Wharton was really in that job, because he was playing the role
No,
of
Wharton was a nut job.
yeah.
He was straight up
He
a
was-
sociopathic
Yeah.
psycho.
Yeah,
Mm.
was he as crazy as he was acting in the prison? Maybe not.
Listen, I've listened
But-
to too many episodes of My Favorite Murder to be like, oh no, that guy's crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
oh no, he
like,
was
that
he
dude
was absolutely
is
like,
certifiable.
He was,
yeah, like
I mean,
Ted Bundy
right,
is
he was
crazy.
so crazy.
Yeah,
It's
crazy.
whether or not you could believe it or not.
No,
Right.
you can believe it. That's the
Mm.
unfortunate thing.
No,
is
I think
you
Josh
can
is.
believe
I
that
think
there
Josh
is
is getting
enough-
more towards like, was the one that we saw in the prison a playa?
Mm.
Was he acting crazier than he actually was?
Okay, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. My
Yeah.
apologies,
Yeah.
but no, like straight up, yes, no, I can believe that.
Yes.
That
Oh,
is the
yeah.
type of
But I
person.
love the domino effect when Coffee came back from helping cure Warden Moore's.
Good
Yeah.
lord, what a
What-
scene!
that
Which,
was
first
great,
of all, Wetmore was a sadist prick, as
Yep.
far as I'm
Oh
concerned.
god, yeah.
And I love the fact that Coffee, all he needed to do was take that illness and place it on him,
Mm-hmm.
and then make it so that, because when he was going out to help cure her, he touched Wharton and
Wharton
He
touched
saw-
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wharton
And
touched
touched
him.
it,
Yeah.
he that's how Coffee found out that it
Yeah.
was him that did it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he had Wetmore pull out the gun and shoot him,
Mm.
And I feel like there was really no other way to do it, though,
Mm.
because, he says how many times throughout the whole book, like, that's a bad man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Mm.
says
And
it
it's like,
repeatedly.
and it's just so
Mhm.
perfect for this to happen the way that it did. That, like you
Mm.
said, it was a brilliant scene. It's actually, even in the movie, it's one of my favorite parts where it's just like, here's the ugly flies. You can go kill him, and now you're done.
Mm.
Like, brain
reading
dead.
it, and I literally was sitting there with my jaw open
Me too.
because I
Mm.
thought he was going to be this like selfless, kind
Mm.
of almost Christ-like character
Mhm.
taking on the like
Mm.
sickness, and that's how he was going to get out of being in the electric chair.
Yeah, I thought the
Of
same
not
thing.
wanting to be around all of that pain and suffering
Mm.
was going to, selflessly take that. But it was just this even more like he is that much of a good man that like
That-
which
it
sounds
wasn't shocking.
bad,
He
but
used
like
it
shocking
to
turn
take
of
out
events, but-
Nemours
Yeah,
guy.
exactly.
But that's
somebody who was going to potentially cause much more havoc in the
Yeah.
world because he was that in tune with that kind of
But
stuff.
nobody's
yeah.
going to challenge it because
No.
we hate Wetmore that much.
Yep.
And everybody
Especially-
hates him that much.
Yeah,
and
especially
those
to
type
what-
of people.
Especially for what he did to Delacroix, which with
Yeah.
Delacroix, as much as his single crime was immoral and heinous, the fact that we develop a sense of sympathy, especially with his interaction with Mr. Jingles
I
the
think
mouse.
that's my favorite thing is that delightful dance around the realm of gray that you
Yeah,
create in this.
yeah.
There's this subsection of right and wrong and morality that is created in this world.
Mm.
And it's
And
so
But
good.
the fact that
is
he
what-
didn't soak the
Oh,
cloth
don't
that
even!
went on his
Oh my
head.
god! I
and
literally
it
was
set
sitting
him
there
on
like
fire.
clawing at my face, like no.
I think though that was like one of my favorite parts of this was like I had to keep reminding myself Delacroix did something horrible. You can't like
But
him
did
as
not
much as
deserve
you
that
do.
sort of death.
No.
And
God,
and
no.
I'm gonna kind of roll back a little bit to what I said before, how this was one of the this was the first Stephen King movie I saw.
That's why I'm
and,
like,
I saw
no,
it as
your
a child.
dad!
No, my dad was all for it because you learn so many things from this book. You see, the prejudices that the America went through, but then you also
The
kind of
brokenness
see
of
that
the system.
everybody has an angle. And yes, these men are bad, but they're still men, and
Yes,
that's
they're
like
still
they're
human.
still human, and like. It's very easy to see a crime and think of somebody as a monster, which is
It makes it easier
yes.
to put strap that helmet on them and
Yes.
turn the switch.
Yeah.
exactly.
But by showing
But
this
then by
humanity-
showing the I guess officers, what would you call them?
Guards.
Yeah, the
Guards.
guards,
Okay. They treat them like men.
And I love
Because-
that.
That's what
like-
Edgecombe tries to get at, is the fact that their goal is to keep them calm. They're already going
Right.
through a
I see that.
And
situation.
it's
Right.
not even
Right.
just to prevent them from snapping and doing anything,
Mhm.
but
To
I mean,
help
you can
them.
you can tell it's like, hey, this man did this, he's gonna die, so treat him like a man, because
Right.
I would want to be treated like a man before
Yeah.
I
Right.
go.
And I
they're-
love
they-
the humanity piece.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like it's
I love
so
It takes-
grounded.
Yeah, it takes place in death row, and it deals with such terrible,
Yeah.
horrible, awful people.
Mhm.
But like, it's like that action was in the moment and at time. And like I said,
And now
like,
we're going to
Stephen King is such a
Yeah.
masterful writer. He's able to make you sit there and really question those things and play
And
with morality.
of all
which
the
is so
places to
good.
have miracles happen,
Mhm.
death row,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
And I
that's just such a
Because he's that good. Again, he's
He is
that
that
excellent
good.
of a writer to be able to play with that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I absolutely love about this, and we were talking about this before we were filming, the fact that this was serially created. Like
Yeah.
it
I was just
wasn't
gonna
It was
say,
like we
written
had the
first.
we had the affordance of being able to say what's going to happen, flip the page and you get
Yeah.
that. Like there were some people who like when this came out,
had to wait.
They had to wait. They had to sit
How
there
did
literally
they- And
like
I think-
biting their nails trying to figure out
And
what was going to
and
happen.
he doesn't do this often. This is a rarity.
Yeah, this
And I
was
think
like a
though that
novel
plays a
idea.
lot into the pacing of this book, because this was the first Stephen King book I've read that I didn't find myself trying to drag myself through the beginning of.
Really.
Yeah, because normally it takes me a while because the beginning is so much like exposition. But this one I was just going.
I will agree with you. There's a lot of he builds his worlds and he builds
Yes.
them sturdy.
Yes.
And
yeah.
sometimes, depending on who you are, that could be like,
Yeah.
oh God, I get it already. Your urinary tract infection, it's bam.
Yeah,
Like,
but the thing is, I think because it was a serial, it was like boom, boom, boom. We gotta go.
And
I
I loved
think-
how he started each one talking as his older self and then writing
Yeah.
the memoirs, and that I feel like also kind of shows how what he was experiencing was reminding him of the past and making it easier for him to remember
And I also
and tell the
like
story.
in that when he backtracks a little bit, almost to recap you and slide you back in.
and
Yeah,
at one
that was
point, I read
perfect.
that and I was like,
I
why
really
is he doing
enjoyed
that?
that,
Like, I'm
yeah.
glad I was reminded. And then I remembered, oh God, it would have been months for
Right.
somebody to read. Like, it may have been months between, the first chapter that they
Yeah.
read and now.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I absolutely loved about the fact that, we were kind of rambling down memory lane was it gave that ending an even bigger punch. That plot twist reveal of how old he really was because of what coffee did in the jail cell was just like a
and the mouth.
And
What?
And there's your Stephen King twist.
yeah, absolutely. And
You
it was
think
just
it's
like
coffee, but it's
signature
not.
King.
It's not
Yeah.
coffee. It's
Yeah.
not
I'm-
important.
I'm-
Yeah, it's
on the
Mr.
topic,
Jingles.
yeah, on the topic of his older self, one thing that really I didn't really like about the film is that the film tried to end it very happily, as happily as
Yes.
possible.
Yeah, this story
This
doesn't
was
have
miserable
a
the way that it
ending.
ended. It was so
Yeah. Bleak.
But you
yeah.
need
The fact that they ended it with his wife being killed in the bus accident when they were going to their granddaughter's
God.
graduation. I think that it made it because it adds on to the fact that all of these people have died before him.
Yeah,
and
him
he
listing
has
all
this-
of the deaths and how they died. That
He
was
has
kind
this
of the,
eternal. Even Mr. Jingles is
yeah.
killed,
Yeah.
but
I think I
or
wouldn't
he dies
necessarily
in the
call
end
it.
as a 64-year-old mouse.
Which,
God bless.
Yeah, right. Seriously, and I have to say I was kind of waiting for the one line because I remember I've seen this movie so many times, and I was the one line that they added to the movie at the end, which is why I disagree why the movie tried to make it seem happy, because his final monologue kind of follows what he had in the book, but then like one of the last lines is like, a mouse lived for 64 years. My God, how much longer do I have to be here?
It's, oh God, the
And
grief
he
I
He
gets
kind of
also
that-
almost flips the switch
because
the
he doesn't
script,
want
sorry.
to be there,
No.
just like John Coffey was like, I'm done with this place.
Well, in
Well,
the,
And
I
he's
definitely
like,
got that
I'm done
impression
with
in
this.
this
Yeah.
book, where
He's
he
100
was just like, I
he's
want
104
to
years
die.
old.
Yeah.
Everybody he's loved or has cared for has died.
Yeah.
And again, if
the
a mouse can live for
most that he's
64
gotten is
years
insomnia.
because of this, how much longer
the-
is he on this
in the
planet?
book, when they're in the shed, he even says, like, the mouse kind of came to him and it was kind of that, like, tap on the shoulder of, like, your card's gonna get called
Yeah, it's
soon.
coming,
So
dude.
it was kind of almost the flip of him not wondering how much more longer, but of I don't have much longer, and that's why I'm writing all of this down. So it was kind of like the mouse was the impetus for him to get this all out on
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That one little line
that
gives such a different spin
It
on
does,
things.
and it does, and the thing was, like, I loved that in the movie, and I was a little disappointed not to see it in the book, being that I saw the movie first and then read the book. But at the same time, it's like, who directed it? Is he really wrong in thinking that if Coffee extended a single mouse's life to 64 years? Is 104 years old really that long?
No.
I
Is
think
he really
he
going
went on
soon,
living
or-
for
Another 100
quite a
years,
bit
I
longer.
would say.
Yeah.
Yep, like his memory might have been going and other things might have been going, but I think
Insomnia
he was
is the
stuck.
worst that he said he got,
Yeah. And
because you get the common cold as well, but that really only every few years or so.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
that's the most heinous part of the book, and he says at one point, like, damnation and salvation have a very fine line, and depending on how you look at it, they are both basically the same exact thing. And I think that is the saddest part. So, like, trying to give this story a happy ending, you can't give it a happy
No.
ending because it's kind of almost showing you, like, time
Careful
is...
what you wish for.
Well, yeah, and time is such a
Yeah.
cruel mistress, and just because you might want more of it, especially like on death row, playing with time and playing with those numbers and living and dying and it's all inconsequential.
And that's the
when it
one
comes down to
thing I
this kind
didn't.
of stuff.
And that's the one thing I didn't like about the film, is that it tried to give it a happy ending.
Yeah, you
But
can't.
it was miserable, and I think it should be miserable.
Which
Like I
sounds
said, that's the
terrible,
only
but,
thing I'm
like-
going to disagree with Josh. I felt like the movie did not try to give it a happy ending because of that last line, which is him basically saying, well, I'm here
Yeah, my
forever.
God,
I'm here
yeah.
forever, and
But
I don't
I
want to
think
be.
it didn't. I think
It's like-
it fit
to me,
better
that
in the
sounds
book.
Sentenced
sad.
to life. He
Yeah.
literally is
Yeah,
imprisoned in his own body at
Yes,
that point.
exactly. Yeah,
It
exactly.
fit better in the book though, because the ending in the film.
The
just seemed
ending in
very
there
pleasant.
was definitely sad, like
Yeah.
sadder,
Mhm.
but I still feel like they didn't try to make it
because at least
happy.
Mr. Jingles survived in the film.
He did survive in the film.
And so
he did
did-
not die a terrible
You
death.
can't kill the animal sidekick off. You, just can't do that.
Mhm.
It's like
Nope.
dogs.
They
like,
tried.
But it's
many
interesting-
times to kill Mr. Jingles.
On the
Oh
topic
boy,
of,
did
He
they.
just wasn't
on
going.
the topic of Mr. Jingles, it's interesting how he served as the almost primarily with Delacroix, but as the mutual pet for everybody in the prison. It's what it makes me think about how there was a prison. They were talking about how they had cats that they would keep for the prisoners, so that it gave them something to show empathy toward and take care of. And this is pretty much it's a simpler version of that, where the mouse he just chooses to be there. It's not like they brought it in. It was just something that roamed around, and
Right.
it just coincidentally was something that someone like Delacroix could show empathy toward.
Yeah.
Something that perked up the prison guards, because the prison guards are going through just as miserable a time as the prisoners because of what they have to go through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because they're on the outside
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily put them in a better position.
And there's more prisoners that they're looking after, because you have Coffee, Delacroix. It's not as you only see the ultimate of the ultimate.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that kind of goes back to what she was saying, like, you know, the grounding that happens in this book. It's like these guards see these men as men because
Yeah.
they talk
Except Wetmore.
except for
Because
maybe a few of them.
Wetmore is a immature little boy who thinks that going to prison means you get to torture prisoners
Yeah.
on their way to their death.
He
So
was
there's
a bad
this-
man.
yeah.
He was
Yeah,
the type of person who would hold
but
the.
there's much
And
more
there's
to...
the small few who don't feel any remorse for what they did, but if you think about it, or at least the way they portrayed it, Delacroix, they were talking about some of the past prisoners, how they did feel remorse, and they got to know these men as people.
and when
And then you have to say, you've been sentenced to die, and then pull the switch on these men, these people that you came to know.
I loved those scenes, though. I loved that you saw them rehearsing for it beforehand.
Oh.
Without the
with
prisoner
Tutu.
present. Like, it was...
Tutu.
That was hysterical.
Yeah. Again, though, it was
I'm
just
sitting,
so, like,
I'm sitting, I'm
humanizing.
sitting.
Like, to see them... They would purposely send the prisoner away to make sure they couldn't witness what was going to be happening.
And they
before.
usually
They
try
brought
to
in
do
the
something
pastor.
happy
Yeah.
to send them
whether
away
it's
too.
visitors
Oh,
or...
yeah.
It just goes to show you, like, that group
when
of
they
people
give
are...
them their favorite meal in the film.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
inherently that's, like, part of it. But the fact that, like, that group of men were so kind-hearted, and even though they were doing, like... I think even Edgecombe says at one point, Paul says, like, out of all of the men that I put to death on death row, like, I have the highest body count because I had 73 or something like that. It was like in the 70s. He killed, quote unquote, or he helped kill at least 70 people, and he did it out of the kindness of his heart. Making sure that they didn't see the rehearsal. Just goes to show you, even though it's the darkest gallows humor of the person pretending, Mr. Toot Toot or whatever his name is, thrashing around and
He's
stuff
the
like
one
that.
that delivered the food to
Exactly.
everybody.
But like it just goes like by showing that shows in this very like subtle way that's how kind-hearted these characters were and
Agreed.
how wonderful these people were
and only
how
the nicest people.
terrible.
They are tough though. They're
They're
yeah.
tough
It's
and
not like
easy,
they-
but
yeah.
they're
You don't get
human
it with that
beings
guy.
with a heart.
You said right to John Coffey. If you need something, we're gonna find.
happen.
Yeah, we're gonna see if it fits your proper needs. This isn't a hotel.
Right.
It was.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
like
he
they
told
were
me.
making grounds not to be taken advantage of, but when
They
it
did
came
everything
down to
they
it, it was
could.
like,
Yeah.
hey, you want a soda? Here's a soda.
Yeah.
Like, you've been good today.
Well-
you can have a treat. Like,
Here's a
I
soda,
you
go
didn't
to
try
sleep,
to
but-
kill me.
I took some college classes
So-
with a prison guard, and in order to keep one or more of his the prisoners calm, he would let him look at porn.
And I mean, you
Just
see
to-
that too.
People are
They
human.
have that
Which-
like olive comic that
Yeah.
they give out when the prisoners are really good.
You know?
Which, like you said, people are human, and you know what?
Yep,
They're
we've
going to
got
respect you and be good for you if you're
Yeah.
good for them, and
Yep.
vice versa.
The true leaders don't
Yeah.
tell people what to do. They inspire people to follow them.
Yeah.
And while this is, again, a heinous situation to be in because these are the lowest of the lowlifes, and, it's still... Humanity is something that you try to find, and it's very hard to find, especially in that sort of setting. But these people who were put in charge of these, people sentenced to death, they act as their therapists, and they act as individuals who are, like, trying to exact things out of these folks. Because they took from someone, so now they have to take that back. And that is a hard job to sit there and take and take and take and take and take, and it weighs on them. And clearly, because all of the folks shortly after the death of Coffee, they I think all die relatively around the same time too because of the stress. Maybe it was the fact that Coffee
and
was
most
such
of them
an
wound up
exceptional
transferring.
I think it was, they ended up transferring and then, like, out of there, and then they all just, like, I think died as they got, like, older
Yeah.
and stuff.
Coffee was the
Yeah.
last one killed in that setting.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff weighs on you, like that.
Yeah.
That is
I
a
also
weight
loved
that you
those
can't
little
get rid
peeks
of.
into the future too, when he was like, "Coffee was the last man I ever killed," and like when they're like, "We both agreed that we would have that transfer by spring," and we did. Like, I loved those little bits,
Well, that lovely little twist of Percy's transfer. Just again, Stephen King is such a phenomenal writer.
They tried to transfer him earlier on, but he was no. I want to see a death. I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to
He
take
was
part in an
such
execution. No.
Yeah,
He was
Percy
a
is-
child.
Yeah, Percy was a child.
He was a man-child.
He was the governor's wife's
Again,
nephew.
everybody-
That's how he got in.
I know I keep on saying this, but like, unfortunately, a lot of the negative characters and antagonistic characters, like, you can think of at least two people who have that sort of clout and audacity, who will try to. They don't belong where they're at, but like they will throw their weight around and be like, if you do anything, you can't really say anything, and put you in between that like rock and a hard place.
I'm sure everybody here has heard about the show, has heard of or watched Cops.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of the spin-off Jail?
No.
There's a spin-off of the show. It's called Jail. It's not as well known, but it has to do with the events that take place once they are arrested and go to
Interesting.
not the prisons, but the holding cells. And the one thing that stuck out to me was there was somebody who was acting up, being belligerent, resistant, and he the next day goes to the officer and apologizes, and he says that I hope you don't take this personally. And the cop told him, I'd be in the wrong job if I did. If that's the way I took it personally.
Like nurses, that's a special kind of person that needs to be able to understand.
People think that
Attached but detached.
But, I mean, you're supposed to be hard on. You're supposed to demonstrate to the prisoners that you are the heir of authority, but you're not supposed to. It doesn't give you room to torture them
a hickory
or
wood baton and a gun to
advantage
be able to
of
do
your
that.
power.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly what.
That's what Percy did.
Everybody but Percy demonstrate, or as far as not taking it personally.
Percy, his power, even though it really wasn't power, it went to his head because he figured, I'm a low rank, but I know somebody, so that means I can be it.
So really,
and it's just like that
and it just goes
arrogance,
to show you, like,
that air of entitlement.
But you can't be a bully and be a leader simultaneously. Like, it ends bad.
And I have to say that was my favorite part, though, where they tricked him and they put him in the straight jacket.
That
was
so sad. That was so like
it
was so delicious, and you're like, you deserve that, Percy. Put your arms out, jerk.
And that's what. And the thing was too, and I loved how he talked about this in the book, where Percy thought he was going to be put in the cell with Wharton. And it's like, that's the kind of person he is.
There's that glimmer of like, oh baby, oh you idiot.
Yeah, and you're just like, and that's when Paul kind of says, he's like, wow, he thought we were people like him.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, because that's what he would have done to someone like himself.
And
goes to show you he's very insecure.
Absolutely, and he's that much of a jerk.
And he's a jerk, and he's mean. And
I will edit myself here and not use more colorful.
Yeah,
and there's
no way.
And there's no way to explain shooting and killing a prisoner, even that way.
Nope.
Not without procedure.
I think what really says a lot is, even if you didn't enter a catatonic state, the fact that they just tried to push him out of the way and like get rid of him and didn't want to talk about him, kind of almost was like everybody kind of almost accepted that like he would do such a crap thing to do. Yeah. Like it wasn't even a question of like how, why,
like,
what,
okay,
how. They're like, okay, he just snapped, and everyone's like, okay.
Everybody's like, we're on the same page about this.
Yeah, nobody fought for him.
Coffee was sleeping, and I don't understand why.
Oh, not just that, but I mean like his connections, like his family and stuff like that. Like everybody collectively was like, yep, okay, Percy was a jerk. Percy went insane.
And I also love how like perfectly all of that had to line up to allow you to have that satisfying ending.
But
it was so satisfying.
It was done in such a way that you
didn't
like,
notice it was happening.
Yeah, it was so again, I keep on saying this, but like he is such an excellent writer. He made it feel organic. Like it wasn't like shoehorned in there of and now we're here at this perfect ending. Like the perfect ending just unfolded itself in this almost bigger than life scenario, as big as John Coffey, and just the graceful exit he had, and my God, just the emotional. I read that part and I was like silently sobbing on my couch, and I was emotionally spent after reading like his death scene, and I was just like
that. I hated that part where he's like, "Don't put the mask on me. I'm afraid of the dark."
I literally had to put my phone down and like walk around to my living room. I was like, I can't do this. He's about to die.
Yeah, that was a very the whole thing leading up to it was just very
it's so well written.
Draining.
Yeah. Yes, because he was so
the
good.
way that they did it in the film too was just very heartbreaking.
Yes,
I got a question.
A question.
This question for for the panel is something that can either be the easiest or the tough. It could be a tough question or it could be a very easy question, and that would be which character in this piece stuck with you the most?
It's a tie between Elaine and Mr. Jingles.
Interesting one.
I was gonna say, I remember the very first time I saw this movie. Not like, I know the book is different, but I saw this movie at a very young age. I loved Paul. Like, I know, like, okay, yeah, he's the main character, but just even after seeing the movie, I always, like, every time somebody said Tom Hanks, I pictured him as Paul Edgecombe. And going through the book, I liked him more because he wasn't so, morally right.
He was human.
Like, yeah, he was human,
very
so it was
human.
like he tossed around a lot, and I felt like he was a very relatable person, or a very relatable character, I should say, that, Stephen King, really gave him a soul and a brain and, like, a personality that you could find in any one of us. And so after reading the book, I only really liked him more. I would say that he's, like, my favorite character. I liked him a lot.
I would be between either Paul or, honestly, Delacroix. There was something about his character
He was fun.
that just, like I said before, like, that gray area between, like, I like you, but I know I shouldn't. It really just... And him and Mr.
Like, it
Jingles,
stuck,
it
yeah.
just really stuck with me.
I think a lot of the characters, there is something about them that is so definable that they are a human being, but they are their own unique character. Like, that is just so great. But, like, for some reason, I'd definitely say, like, Elaine is one of those characters that...
She was a boss.
Besides being the coolest old lady
was,
ever,
like, yeah.
she was just very, like... There was some spark in her that I could see, like, my grandmother in. Who,
You know who else I really liked too? Paul's wife. I feel like she
Yeah.
had, I
Yeah.
couldn't
she and
remember.
Elaine are
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
similar.
I was gonna say,
Yes.
she was fun. She's like, oh, you boys are up to no good.
Don't tell them. Yeah. You guys are up to no good. I'm going to be in the other room so you can do it.
She goes, you let me know when you need tea.
She's very, like, that is, I think, the Stephen King perfect wife woman.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, Jan,
They have
Elaine...
the perfect relationship of, like, what should I do, honey? Like, this man is innocent. Like, what should I do? And she's
But
like,
not only that, like...
he can cure people. Like, you need to break him out of jail. You can't kill him. Like,
And
like
one
she
of my
was so...
favorite scenes, too, was when he came home from work that one morning, and she just held him while he cried, because for me, that was so...
That was
relatable,
a touching
and
moment.
Yeah.
And
like,
it goes
here's
to
this
show you
big
that's how
prison
good...
guard dude just bawling his eyes out,
That
and I loved that.
goes to
Yeah.
show you what
That
a
was- yeah, that was-
fantastic person Paul is, because, like, he allowed himself to cry.
Yeah.
And he
In
allowed
that
himself to
time-
cry in front of his wife.
Yeah. And
Which,
in that
exactly,
time
not
is-
even, notwithstanding the time that it was, where, that
Men don't
toxic
cry.
masculinity was, like,
Yeah.
in its heyday.
Yeah.
Not that it's any better nowadays, but, like, just it goes to show you, like, that's a strong person who's in touch with their feelings, and is just, like,
And is
Such a
comfortable
good
enough
character.
with his wife to know that she's not gonna
Judge him.
or, say anything or whatever. It's just like, here's a man who has stood there and gave the order to kill so many people. Of course it's gonna get to him.
Stephen King does this excellent job of creating, like, this woman and his stereotype of the, like, perfect wife. Lissy's story, where the character is the main character, she kind of falls in this bucket, which is, like, a really cool bucket to fall into, because, like, usually when you see horror stories or stories that are thriller or something to that effect, like, the woman is either, like, helpless or listless or, strong, independent, and it's very, like, fragile and in its structure. Stephen King does this excellent job, and he must really like his wife or something like that. Like he always
he does. So.
There's like
actually
shows.
she does.
Yeah, because like I hate pulling off topic a little here, but like Jan reminded me so much of Lissy, because Lissy was this strong character that had this moral strength and like stuck to her guns and like literally like defended her husband at one point, and there's a lot of these pieces that he pulls from that like you can find almost in every single piece that I've read of his so far, which isn't a bad thing. Like you write what you know, and he knows certain things and he does it perfectly.
He knows his wife.
And
This is also
clearly like he
this
loves
is during
his wife.
an era
and
where
it
Stephen
shows.
King he wrote a lot of works that surrounded very somewhat similar women. In Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, and Rose Matter. They were very, from what I've read, they were very, and from summaries that I've read, very similar to each other.
Yeah, and
So,
clearly he has some
and
sort
I think
of
that
like
it reflects on this.
yeah, which was surprising if you look at the time that it's written. Like to have such strong women, even if they're in the backseat, to have such strong women and not just be devices.
And that's what I liked so much about her. It was like, yeah, like he came home and she was doing her womanly duties, but she was strong enough to be the backbone when her husband needed to have a vulnerable moment.
Also, be reminded of his
And-
vulnerability when she was
Yeah.
like, "How the hell are you walking away from this guy and letting
Yeah.
him hang and doing nothing about
Yeah.
it?"
Oh, that was great.
That
when
was
she's
a
like, "What's wrong
wonderful
with you?" And she
scene.
like
Yeah.
throws everything off the
Yeah.
table. She's like, "Ah!" and just like
Get it.
walks away.
Yeah.
And that was the best part. Is like all the men sat there in silence, and then they're like, "We're gonna clean this up."
Yeah, I love that. That was a great scene.
She is angry. We don't talk to her. We take care
But
of
she
this.
right. She is
did what-
right.
She's right.
He did what he could, but John Coffey
Yeah.
did not want to be saved. He
No, in the
was
end,
he was
no.
through.
He
And-
he had been he was tired and he had enough, and his character was just too good for this world.
I agree.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that like that stuff still is around.
The thing is,
today,
though, like
but-
John Coffey and his character, I feel like as simple as his character was, he was still pretty complex because
Oh,
you
absolutely.
have him,
Yeah.
you know, doing all these miracle things, but it's not just miracles. He can hear and feel other people's pain. So of course, if you're, how old is John Coffey?
Nobody knows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which means he's a grown man. He's got to
We
be at least 25, which means, can you imagine walking around for 25 years?
We-
At least. That's not even his magical powers making him older. Like, at least 25. For 25 years, he walked around hearing and feeling pain and the worst of
But
humanity.
it just goes
So
to show
it's
you how
like-
innocent he like that was
Mhm.
just he was that innocent of an individual.
And
And
when
I think
he
that
was
plays-
done, he was done.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
we know is that he was 6'8".
Yeah.
6'8"
But
bald.
I
He was
think that
60.
plays
Very,
into the
very
like the
large.
simple-mindedness of his character. Like he couldn't have been more intelligent than he was because he was just feeling so much.
I was just saying, and it's that cyclic thing of like because he was so simple-minded, and I use that in the fact of like I'm not trying to be rude, but like he was so,
Intelligence,
yeah,
yeah.
you know, he was so simple-minded. He was able to do all of these crazy things and feel all of these things, but also if you want to think about it. If you are getting bombarded with all of that, how could you possibly be able to process your own thoughts because you're processing
Right.
everybody else's? So how you just have to like sit back
Yeah.
and I guess take the reins,
Yeah.
take the back seat for that kind of stuff. So it's kind of this like one begets the other endless circle. Or
To answer Jesse's question on the age, I mean this film came out in 99, 2000.
Yeah, something like that.
I would say Michael Clark Duncan. I'm trying. He was in his early 40s at the time that it came out. I would say that he was close. I would say he's more so in his 30s, maybe 40.
Yeah, so, but
I
even
think
so,
that's
it's like,
accurate, yeah.
whether he's
Hollywood
older or
30
younger,
is like the real life 20. Like it there really is no age range.
but, and that's what I was saying, it's like this character, you know, yeah, you don't really know how old he is, you just know he's a grown-ass man. So it's
Yeah.
just like, a
Yeah.
grown-ass man is at least 25.
Yeah.
He can be older or whatever, but that tells you that it's like for at least that long, if not longer, he's been feeling the worst of humanity. And
And I
like,
think that's
yes,
what
he's
made you truly
forgetful,
weep
and you're
about
like,
him.
yeah.
Was the fact that he
He
was
had to
this
suffer this.
wonderfully innocent, beautifully souled individual, and he had to literally face the like sledge and the like cesspool that is the human psyche.
Now I have
every
to
single
say,
day.
the
Of
And
that
still,
time.
of that time, and still was willing to reach out and help those who needed it.
And the book ruined one thing for me because I spent my whole life since the first time I saw this movie. All right, spent my whole life sitting there thinking, you guys, all right, for those of you who've seen the movie, all right, you haven't, you will, you should, you'll love it. Okay, you have to. I will watch it with you.
You sound like an Italian grandpa.
Eat it all, and you'll be fine.
Yes, it's so good. So like I feel like the scene in the book, obviously, where everything goes wrong with Delacroix's thing.
Oh.
Well, when they show it in the movie, they often flash back to coffee, and it shows him in pain. And my whole life before reading this book, I was like, as much as I love coffee and I don't want him to feel pain, please tell me he at least took the pain away from this poor man frying in the electrical chair.
But he can't. He has to touch them.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And in the book, they tell you he didn't. And I just, because he's like, I can still hear the screams in the chair.
God,
and I spent my whole
line.
life, I was like, I was really, it would have made me feel better if he could take that pain away from Delacroix. Because he didn't deserve that.
God, yeah, no,
It
but
was terrible.
the line where he says like they're still in there, I can hear them screaming. That line, the damnation versus salvation line, and then there was another line. And it was like magic can be dangerous, and talking about that, and writing, and those three lines stick out so. And I don't know why that magic can be dangerous line, but just the fact of like writing is such a. The pen can be wielded as a sword or as a shield, and it's like this is a perfect example of that. Even if it's just fictional, like he is still like Stephen King is putting all of us on read, as a society of saying, look at these things that we have, look at these terrible things that we've done to people who are far, far more innocent than we can ever assume to be, maybe not supernaturally innocent, God's will or a supernatural entity taking over them or them themselves being able to heal these people, but these individuals on the daily that you make a snap judgment. And like I can tell you, like personally, I accidentally did that to a coworker where I assumed one thing and then like several days working with them like realized like
me too.
I made a terrible decision about this person just because of like previous examples of things that I experienced and like with other people who might be kind of similar to them. And it does a really good job of setting up this environment to be able to say like this is an isolated incident, but it happens every single day out there in the real world with real people, and not just these people. And by putting it in a supernatural thriller or fictional world, by blowing it up to the size of John Coffey, 6'8" black bald man who wouldn't hurt a fly, so supposedly
Afraid of the dark.
Afraid of the dark, which that little detail like broke my heart from the jump. That sitting here, I just hit my 10,000 steps. Anyway, I talked to my hands too much. But long story short, like he wields that pen and does a wonderful job by saying like we must take ownership for the world that we live in, and you shouldn't let the good ones die because they feel like they can't live in it too much longer. It's your job to make sure that there's one less bad thought out of there in the world.
All right, back to what we were originally talking about. Josh, what was your favorite character?
Oh.
We are all Sorry. We took a turn.
We're the worst.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Josh Caparelli. And I'm a panelist on the Very Gladiators.
I'm here once in a while.
I say
Well,
things
this is
occasionally.
first off. This is your fault. You made an entire panel of women who like to talk. So, did you really think you were going to get a word in edgewise there?
God, that's terrible.
I thought that when we sat down, I was like, Josh.
Oh, no.
What did he do?
No, he's not saying anything. The poor man.
You're women.
I always thought you were the most decent woman on this panel.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Already that. But when I wrote my first review for this 12 years ago for the Barnes & Noble book review site, three characters to me really stuck out and resonated with me as some of my favorites, and that was going to be it's going to be the basics: Paul Edgecombe, John Coffey, and Mr. Jingles.
We love Mr. Jingles.
Can't
the
argue
best.
with the classics.
But because there's just something about the way that these characters are fleshed out and humanized that no matter how good, how bad, how perfect, how flawed they are, they're just very well written, very well fleshed out, and I really created a clear bond with them.
Can you believe that we're talking about a mouse?
And the thing with
favorite character's a mouse.
with no disrespect to the guards,
that's how good
Edgecombe had the guards that he was that were part of his shift. They reflected him very much in how they were empathetic toward as empathetic as possible. Strict, tough, but empathetic. But in honesty, sometimes they seem to blend in with one another.
Yeah, and I think that they were only that empathetic because Edgecombe had taught them to be that way.
Yeah, for sure.
They followed his lead.
You had Edgecombe.
And he was that kind of person who...
Yeah, Edgecombe, every guard, but Wetmore.
Yeah.
But, do we have any final thoughts?
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I got nothing else to say. Are we going to do a ratings?
I'm very happy that you were. Let's go to ratings.
Okay, 5 out of 5.
Yep.
6 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm with her. This was just, I couldn't, even if there was a flaw, it wouldn't matter because I feel like everything else was so good.
Flaws?
And
never heard of them.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Stephen King has no flaws.
I gave it. You go ahead.
But yeah, no, it was such a great story. I feel like it's a very original, classic kind of story. Very original. Like when somebody says the Green Mile, you know it.
Yeah.
You
iconic.
know it.
It's
Even if you've never seen it, you've never read it, you know the Green Mile.
It's only going to solidify itself even more.
Yeah.
I gave it a 5 out of 5 when I read it 12 years ago. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 now. So
Hey, Tori.
that's 3 out of 4.
What's your score from over there? Oh, is that 5 out of 5
She's
too?
giving us 5 fingers.
Is that 5 out of 5 for everybody?
That's a 5 out of. That's 4 5 out of 5s. That's only the 4th time that it's ever happened on the show.
Way to go,
We've the others are Fahrenheit 451 and The Martian Chronicles, both by Ray Bradbury. The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle.
Of course.
And now The Green Mile by Stephen King.
Stephen King, welcome to the 5 out of 5 club.
This is the first one. Josh loves Stephen King.
I'm getting more and more into
This will
him.
be the one that leads me into the rest.
Mhm.
I mean,
I was
I've
gonna
read
say-
a couple, but this will be.
He read Salem's Lot was the first one I read with you.
Yes.
And then I've just been slowly kind of reading some short stories here and there.
I've read
and then
several
Green
Stephen King
Mile.
books myself. I've
I like
read.
them.
I would list them, but
It would take too long.
It'll take a
We'd
while.
be here all night.
I can list them later, but
I went on Wikipedia and looked for all the Stephen King book to TV or movie adaptions, and it's a sickeningly long list.
Yeah.
I think everything he's ever touched has been turned into gold in movies.
I mean, speaks for itself.
already.
Yeah.
If you're interested in checking out The Green Mile by Stephen King, which you should, here is my copy that I bought. I think actually my mother got it for me. We were at Walmart and I saw Stephen King's books and I wanted to get this in Pet Cemetery, and my mother got it for me on the basis that Grandma could never say no to books.
I actually got mine at Barnes & Noble. I just didn't bring it with me. It's one of the new ones where it actually shows with the new cover, the fancy, where it shows the Green Mile and it's got the fancy writing on it. I was like, I should have brought it with me. It's so fancy.
Yeah,
Listen to
absolutely.
it on audiobook.
But before we sign off, I just wanted to do a bit of. I just want to make a public service announcement because in the coming week, the primaries for the election of the nominations for the major parties will be coming up. The Iowa caucuses are in a few days, and I want to encourage people to take part in their primaries and select the person that they want to represent their party. Yeah, because I know that you should definitely take part in your general election, and I beseech that you do so, your general election voting, because voting is one of the clearest ways to make sure that your voice is heard. But a lot of people, I find, ignore the primary, and they see that they don't think their voice is as strong. But it is, because you should have a say regarding the person that represents your preferred party. I mean, there's people that are in the middle, like the independents, but this is the best opportunity, and I encourage you to take part.
Rock the boat.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna have. I'm gonna have to.
I love voting.
After we finish here, I'm gonna have to try and get Tori to convince her to come back on. Whether or not I have to bribe her.
You have greatly offended her.
I'll have to see if I can bribe her with food or favors or hugs.
You're just lucky I like you because I was offended.
Okay.
She wasn't.
Oh, before we leave.
Oh boy. Oh, the bunnies!
Several months, a few months ago, we had a group of bunnies here, and my little bunny here, Cream Puff, wanted to. He wanted to kiss his favorite gladiator on the cheek, and so I told him that Kaila was going to be at the session. So.
Thank you, little cream puff.
Oh,
thank you.
And he'll kiss you too.
Oh, yay. But
if only Tori were here.
Alrighty then. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. And for now, keep reading.